What's up, guys? Welcome to Nutmegged, the podcast where Yank and a Brit talk about the beautiful game from across the pond. I'm Andrew, as always, representing the Stars and Stripes, and we have Faisal holding down the crown in the UK. Faisal, what's going on?
All good, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to get this show get stuck into this show, man. It's gonna be a good one.
It is. We have a special guest joining us for today's episode. Nathan Chwalik, conveniently also my brother, is the co-founder and director of Delaware Rising. He's played soccer his entire life, going from Delaware Knights, FC42, Buckeye Valley High School, Walsh University, and then was also a player for Delaware Rising in its first 3 seasons. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, happy to talk about the sport any chance I can.
Yes, we feel the exact same way. So, Faze, I'm going to flip it over to you because you have some very burning questions I know that you want to dive into this conversation with. So, Faze, take it away.
Yeah, of course. It's great to have you here, Nathan. We're going to get stuck into obviously working with Andrew as your brother and Delaware Rising in particular. I just wanted to get, first things first, how do you find that? Because that is quite a unique experience and not many people would have that experience. How did you find that? And then, was there any particular sort of like highlights of your time having Andrew as your manager?
And actually, before Nathan, you jump in, would you mind just painting the picture for like listeners, like what Delaware Rising is too? So like Faze and I talk about Delaware Rising quite a bit, but I know like you have a different perspective coming into it as well as like leading the charge as the director too. So like paint the picture and then feel free to dive in and then slap about my poor managerial record.
Of course, yeah. So Delaware Rising is a minor league soccer team here in Delaware, Ohio. We are formed as a nonprofit, and we feature both a men's and women's senior team. So we compete throughout the state of Ohio and feature a lot of collegiate and former professional players at what is kind of the highest level for lower league soccer in the state.
Yep. I would say that's perfectly put. It's a fun, cool experience. But so feel free now, dive into a Faze's question and kind of paint the picture of the behind the scenes of Delaware Rising.
Yeah, of course. So I think it's fair to say we had humble beginnings with the club. We started playing at one of the local parks, getting field space there. It was right after COVID, so renting like nicer turf facilities and stadiums was a bit difficult. So we were playing at a local park, getting together the group of guys we could, had a few tryout sessions. So we had a decent squad with a wide variety of levels of players. And of course, Andrew leading the charge as the manager. And Andrew and I have been around the sport our whole lives and together as well, playing in the backyard, trying to break each other's ankles one-on-one, of course. So I think having him involved in everything from the start is always a blast. And Andrew brings this intense energy, which can be good and bad sometimes, but it's always a lot of fun to have a manager that's amped up and can bring the players to life like that. So I think that was a lot of fun having in our first year and really kind of set the stage for what we wanted the team to be later on as well.
Speaking of humble beginnings, so just as an example, we loaded up our mower on a trailer and mowed the pitch ourselves because it was too long for like a game the next day. And we knew that the city was not going to mow it. So that was like really humble beginning as it gets. But so I was the manager for our first season because like humble beginnings, we were trying to figure it out, create the structure, make it happen, especially after COVID. You're right. It was so difficult. But my record was like 2-7 or something. And one of those was a forfeit. So it was an exciting, rough journey to begin our existence. That is for sure. But like you said, so it was just so fun. And especially being able to get to like do this with you, it's been such a cool experience to like grow this club together and to like grow our relationship and be able to bond over the beautiful game too. It's been so fun.
I love that. I think it's really sweet to, like I said, the way you guys have worked and brought it from the ground upwards. Just throwing it back to when you guys were growing up, football wise. I mean, I think a lot of the listeners are probably asking this, right? Like you both play football at a certain level. Who is the better footballer, would you say, out of the both of yourselves? Like growing up, like, I mean, it was obviously you're individually biased, but what would you say is who's the better footballer?
I would have to say myself. I feel like I had a bit of a longer collegiate career and, playing after college as well. So I think I was in a bit more of a competitive environment a bit longer than he was. And I think So he's 5 years older than me. So there was a time when he was the better player. And I think at that point where I suddenly grew taller than Andrew is when those tides kind of changed there.
Yeah, that's very true. That was quite helpful. The height and size was definitely in your favor. But I would also say, like, even like when you were, for example, like at 19 and when I was at 19, you were definitely the better player for sure. You have much more skill and you practiced and played a lot more intensely than I did as well. Like the only like good skill really that kind of carried me through my soccer career was I have like the Landon Donovan battery. Like I can just run for a really long time. Like that's the main skill that allowed me to play. So that was it. Nathan has much more skills than that. So it's very good. He's definitely the better player.
Nice, very nice. And then thinking back to you mentioning kind of your collegiate career and stuff, the work stuff you're doing. Do you want to sort of talk us through that and how you got into it and why football in particular? And then how was your kind of experience during that sort of system as well?
Yeah, of course. So, just growing up, we got into soccer and just kind of stuck with it as the main sport, I guess, as the staple for us growing up. We've played a few other sports here and there, but soccer was always the main force for us. And I think looking into like the college experience, I always knew I wanted to play soccer after high school. I know for a lot of players in America, usually that's where careers end, right? That's where they stop playing their sports and they can be done with sports like completely after that. It's pretty common. So I knew I wanted to continue it in some fashion. And Andrew attended Walsh University prior to me coming there. So he had some connections that I was able to tap into to help get into the team. And that allowed me to continue the dream of playing the sport. And playing collegiate soccer is a blast too, because that's kind of as into it as you get, right? That's like almost a professional experience. You're playing day in, day out. You're training every day, doing the workouts. You have the camaraderie, living with your teammates. It's traveling with your teammates, and it's a blast. Yeah, it's so much fun. So I played collegiately for 3 years until like a COVID era, which then I stopped after that because I kind of put our season a bit into a bind as I think we like transitioned to a spring season instead of a fall season, which is where the college season usually runs. But yeah, I came in as a center defensive midfielder freshman year. And in America, a lot of college teams have these just massive rosters. So you can see teams having squads of 40 plus players, which is that's kind of nuts to think about. But if you have players there for like the right reasons for school as well as the sport, then it kind of makes sense for some of those players. And I know with Walsh specifically, we also had a lot of competitions for those fringe players, which is kind of where I fell into, especially as like one of the younger players coming in as a freshman that wasn't necessarily recruited. And we played we did a few tournaments with some other colleges throughout the area. And then later into my years, I started to get a few more chances to break into that squad. And we've had some preseasons that went pretty well, but never really got the full break into where I'd be starting or getting a good chunk of minutes. So I don't think it was exactly what I hoped my college career to be, but regardless of the level I was able to play at, it was a blast through and through.
I would say the same too. Like I never fully broke into like the full first team squad. So I got a few minutes here and there as well. But I know our experiences were a little bit different. So coaches transitioned right before you came in. So my head coach at Walsh was a different head coach than who you had. But your experience was a little bit different because the roster that our coach had built, we had a few international players here and there. But I know by the time that the new coach came in and then your roster was there, you had a lot more international players. So I think that is like a trend that you see with some colleges trying to do. Would you mind talking about that experience a little bit and like what you think that looks like? If that's a good thing, a positive thing, if it's more difficult because it's not bringing in more U.S. players to give them opportunities to grow in the game. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is super common to see just so many international players on a team, and the NCAA doesn't really have any restrictions that I'm aware of in terms of the amount of Americans or local players you should have. So I know specifically with Walsh, our starting lineup, I mean, even our bench and substitutes was primarily international players. We probably had like a handful of Americans. That's actually pretty common among a lot of other like higher division schools in the United States. And I think it's a bit of a bummer in terms of like the American soccer, like the ability to help American soccer, right? Because I feel like it gives less chances for those Americans to grow into the sport, to develop, and to get chances, and even just to continue playing. So I think it is a bit harder for Americans to find opportunities in college soccer, just because a lot of times it is really geared towards bringing in international players, but also does raise the level too. So I think there's some pros and some cons to it, right? There's a lot of opportunity to really refine a lot of those top tier American players, but also it leaves out a lot of players too.
I think that's like one of the reasons that we love Delaware Rising too, so that we can offer more of those experiences for Americans, but also other international individuals that have moved to the US and made it their home as well. The thing that I think is interesting too is FaZe doesn't get to see like this full US experience, like the minutia of like a college team, that being associated with the university, and like no limits of like, hey, we're just going to get all these international individuals coming to play on the roster, and there's no roster rules like you would see in the MLS that has to have a certain amount of US players to try to keep them growing. So it is interesting. It's like a different world than what soccer is over abroad.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating because you have these sorts of like the collegiate system and how it is. It's just you have people playing football, but you have massive, like huge crowds, and it's just a different energy, different environment. It feels very much like a proper real football experience. Where, for example, at university, it was very much like there was like 3 or 4 teams, like A team, B team. The A team were the best team, the highest players, and you kind of went in, and it was just literally just you played other universities in a very kind of like every Wednesday or so. It wasn't very as much as it is now. So yeah, I think that's great, and it's fascinating. I'd love to do it one day, 100%. I mean, I've got a Delaware Rising top, so I'm inducted. I'm in now, so I definitely want to see a game and visit you guys for sure. I think that'll be really cool. Thinking about Delaware Rising and how you were playing and how you get into the system, etc. Is there like a highlight for you? So is there one game or is there one performance that you would like, when you think about Delaware Rising, you think about that one thing?
I would have to say, there's so many. We had a lot of good matches over the season.
Is there a particular goal, for example, or particular like interception that you made that you're like, yeah, this was key for me and I really enjoyed it. Like, this is my spot.
I think there's a match I'll bring up. We played our rival team, Greater Columbus. This was our first matchup against them. And they are actually made up of a good chunk of former Delaware Rising players that decided after the first season that it wasn't for them and started their own group. Which was a bit interesting because of how they, And so it was pretty heated just because of like how they went about it. They tried poaching a few players, so it was a pretty intense match between us, and they definitely had do have a lot of quality players, and we were up against them for the first time ever, and it was just such an intense match. It was like 90 degrees outside and we're playing on like a turf field. So it's just intensely hot. Like right out the get-go, I think one of our players and our head coach gets a red card just out of some strange interaction with the referee. And the referees actually showed up late too. So like there's just all this other like issues with the game kicking off at the normal time. So there's all these different elements adding to it. And it was just like one of the best matches I think our club has ever played on the men's side. We just locked them down completely, like the league's top scorers in our back pockets. It was great. Yeah, I think we were playing a 3-back formation. I was left center back, and it was just no one could get past us. It was great. One of those matches that you just never forget. We won 1-0, so it was just tight throughout the match. And just a huge result for the team and a huge like morale boost.
And it was exciting too, because it was like a last minute goal that won it for us. And if listeners are out there and you want to dive into the Delaware Rising archives on our YouTube channel, that game was streamed live. I called it. It was so fun. Yeah, that game was an intense one. I will never forget that one. That was a good one.
I love that. Just the way I can visualize it. That hot days football where you're just sweating and you go for every single tackle, every single ball, you're just laying it out there. I love that. I think that's great. Just thinking about Delaware Rising, staying with Delaware Rising for a second. Obviously, you mentioned that obviously Andrew being on the sidelines and going to that kind of managerial area. Was there anything while Andrew's kind of managing? Was there any particular like decisions that he made that you were like, oh, that's a great shout, or you were a bit like, well, I don't know, Andrew. Like, I don't know. I wouldn't do that if I were you, but you've just kind of gone on. Has there ever been like a, on the sidelines?
Yeah, like I said, I think Andrew brings that high intense energy and he transitions that a bit into his coaching philosophy. And I think one of the main like focuses of his style is just press. And, our summer season, it does get hot. Like I mentioned, like it's every game, it's hot out there. So just consistently pressing, and a lot of times where we don't always have depth, summer season players may be out of town. Lower league soccer, that can happen sometimes. You don't always at full strength. So just sometimes those summer games, just trying to sprint after every ball and shut things down is a bit difficult at times.
I would say, yeah, I completely agree. That was like my first head coach managerial experience too. So I just said, okay, I'm just going to have everyone play the way that I play. I can just run all the time. So why can't everybody else just run all the time? That just makes sense to me. And yeah, with the Heat, with the lack of a deep roster and not maybe having the necessarily best skilled players to do those types of pressings and to not even like set up an actual pressing system, I definitely was just winging that. And I would completely agree. That was probably not the best route, but hey, we made the playoffs and it was kind of by like a default little extra forfeit thing that happened at the end of the season, but I'm going to always claim that. So it is what it is.
That's cool. I really like that. Like I said, I think the fact that you guys have you put in time and effort to kind of curate a team and develop a team to where you are today, I think is fantastic. And I think we definitely need a full episode about that as well. I think that's really intriguing. And I think you go ahead.
One other like managerial thing too. So it was an awesome experience. I learned a ton from just being a part of managing a team. Like my first experience in that first year was so much fun. It was awesome. We had great guys. It was an awesome time overall. But then also that like helped lead me into being an assistant coach at Buckeye Valley High School, which like I learned a ton there as well. We have a really good coach that actually coached Nathan that was there, and Eric Staley, great dude, awesome gentleman. He will say that someday he's going to write a book about being just like an average soccer coach. I always loved it. I thought that was so cool. He said like, yeah, I'm average. I can coach some guys to like a certain level, but after that, like, hey, it is what it is. So great dude. But then also that was cool because then Nathan is now the assistant coach at Buckeye Valley as well. So like something that I left out of the introduction, he also is now diving into the managerial side as well.
We'll pick up on that. Yeah, let's jump onto that. That's intriguing actually. So how did you try to transition into that? And how are you feeling in terms of taking that step into sort of assistant coaching at the moment?
Yeah, so I've kind of slowed down what it looks like for me playing on the field. I had my last season with the Delaware Rising squad this past summer. So I figured I'll give coaching a try and see if that's for me. I feel like I just have a lot to offer based on being able to play at the level I did and give some insights for some local guys. And I think having just a lot of experiences with so many different types of coaches has helped a lot. Before jumping into Buckeye Valley, I actually assistant coached the women's side for Delaware Rising under head coach Evan Worley, and that was a big learning experience for me too, because that was my first season as a coach. And I think that gave me a little bit of confidence going into an assistant coach role with Buckeye Valley into high school soccer. And just being involved with that program again was kind of big for me too, because that's where I graduated from and played for my high school career. So it was it's pretty important to me to be able to offer my experiences as a player and what I've learned to some of those guys that were kind of like in my shoes when I was there.
I think that sounds great. And is that something for you long term? Like, what is the goal? Like, what is Nathan doing? Say, like 5 years down the line. Like, is it assistant coach, manager? Like, what's your plan? That's
a good question. I'm still kind of feeling out what it's like to be a coach. I don't feel like I've fully grasped what my decision will be in a few years from now, whether I want to make a jump to a more serious coaching role or kind of stay where I am as an assistant and be that supporting role. So I'm still kind of feeling it out. I might look into getting some more licenses to build upon my coaching knowledge, but we're kind of playing it by ear right now.
I will say, I'll like give you a direct 5-year view. I will like one thing I'd love to see in the next 5 years is like you as director still, and hoping at least having it be like a part-time job, like where it's like an actual legit paid position, so that it just keeps growing in that direction. Hopefully that's the case. So in 5 years, hopefully we see that.
And as you're speaking, Andrew, is that like, do you have like a top tip for Nathan in management? Like, what's your top tip that you'd give him if it was like get into that?
So I will say the relationships that you build with your players is like the key thing for me. And there are different types of managers out there. There are some that are just like more direct, like, hey, I'm here to be your coach to make you a better soccer player, period. That's great. I've had coaches that are like that. I've also had more coaches too that are like, hey, I'll kind of like lead you along the way, like help you develop, of course, as a player, but also as a person. And I took more of that route. So I still have a lot to learn, and I love being a manager. So I want to do that someday in some fashion long term, but I know that I'll always be a manager that tries to like help build those relationships with those players too. So I will say, like, not necessarily be a coach like that, but just be aware of that. So that'd be my tip to you, but any listener too that wants to get into some type of managerial coaching aspect, because if you think about it, you as a coach, you'll coach a ton of players. However, the players that are playing under you will only have a handful of coaches in their soccer career. So you'll really have a big impact on those players. And it can be a good one, it can be a bad one. So as a coach, I would just say kind of be aware of those relationships and then the lasting impression that you're going to leave with those players, because like I said, they'll only have a handful of coaches and they'll remember you as a part of it. So hopefully it's a good one.
Great shout. Really great shout. I'm thinking more so like you kind of mentioned, Nathan, about like starting off with the women's team and having some experience in the women's team and coaching the men's team, doing the coaching men's team. How do the two differ, would you find? And how was the difference between the two, you think?
I would say, like, being with the group that we have with Delaware Rising, it's just at such a high level. I feel like it's borderline like a college program, just the amount of skill and level that they have. And then with the boys team, it's a little bit less refined. It is like a rural high school team. So it's more so of the fundamentals. And you do have some players that are way outside of that, and they're just phenomenal players and stand out. But it's also, how can you help players where they're at in their career and where they are at their level, to kind of bring them up. And no matter whether that's, if they're a phenomenal player, it's how you can help them as well. So it's just, I think with the high school team, it's just a lot more, every player has a lot more individual needs, I think, than the Delaware Rising group did, just because of the consistency across the level there.
I would say it's like, it is cool to like be on the outside of like the men's and women's side for Delaware Rising, and like seeing how our coaching staff like manages those types, and the coaching staff that we've had throughout the last couple of years, like seeing the different coaching styles and how they interact with the players too. But like overall, like you had said, it's kind of like a collegiate program. What Delaware Rising is, like the competition level is quite intense for both sides. And I would say overall, I talk about this a lot, like the difference between men's and women's soccer. I think it's just so beautiful more than any other sport, because like you can really carry over the same types of strategies. You can use the same formations. Like it just is almost the same. The type of tactics you can use, the way that it's managed. When, again, I give the example all the time of like the WNBA versus the NBA. Like there's just a difference in the type of athlete that you'll see on the men's side versus the women's side. So you have to tweak strategies and do things a bit differently. But like when you're talking about men's and women's soccer, like strategies will be fairly similar because the game is played in such a similar way. And our women's and men's team, they're both so intense. Like I wouldn't be able to take some type of difference between the two, because really, like, it is just such an awesome professional program that's a great compliment to our coaches that manage it that way, but then also the players too. They are like fighting for everything. So like I would not be able to be on a pitch with either of them, because of those squads, they're both so intense and awesome. That's why I now play in like an over 30 indoor league. That's about as intense as I can get.
And then in terms of your actual, going back to your actual football playing like days when you're like in the peak of your football career, what was your, do you have any kind of rituals, anything that you did any pre-game things that you did beforehand?
I'm actually not too superstitious. If anything, it was probably just like taping up my wrists, get some nice wrist support. That was always consistent. But other than that, nothing too crazy now.
I would say the same. Like I don't think I ever did any specific type of rituals or anything like that in my soccer career phase. Did you?
It was more. It's more in the stuff that you're wearing. So, for example, my boots, I have to make them really tight. So I just kind of knew that was the area, and I had to have my like, ever so often your stock kind of rolls down a bit. You really got to keep on top of it. And every time there was like a free kick or something, like that, any kind of like anything you're going to set piece, you had to make sure everything was set before you started that particular area. So that was kind of my area, but nothing like, I know some people do some crazy stuff beforehand. Like they have to like, you see the players, for example, like on the Premier League, they'll just they'll hop out with 1 foot. So they have to jump onto the pitch with their right foot. Luke Shaw does that where he like jumps in the air every so often just to get himself like does a little run and jump up. So people have little small quirks, but just making sure my kit's just there. That's mindless.
I would say I was probably never a good enough soccer player to have rituals. That's probably what my issue was.
And then thinking about sort of your keeping on the football playing side of stuff. So you said you were centre back. So you defence, is that your third role position or?
Yeah, so I've pretty much played every position in my career. I've been all over the place. Collegiately, I was a bit of a more attacking player. So I came in as a defensive midfielder, went to more of an outside wing and then forward my last year there. And then with Delaware Rising, I was playing midfield, then into center back and then outside back. So kind of all over the place.
Where's your like preferred, like, this is my spot?
If I had to choose, I'd probably say either a winger or a center attacking mid. I just think that like complements my play style a little bit better.
Nice. And then going into this, so obviously here at Nutmegged we talk a lot, the Premier League in particular. Is there anyone that you'd compare yourself to as a footballer? And is there anyone that you'd say yourself? Okay, it's a big question because you're comparing yourself to some of the best players in the world, but still, like, is there any player that you'd compare yourself, the style of player that you do have and you do kind of play?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, definitely not comparable at that level at all, but I would probably say maybe like Marcus Rashford, just because of how he like bounces around in lots of different positions in the attack. And like he's super agile and pacey. I'm kind of along those lines. Not the best dribbler, but can still take players on here and there. And I'm just enjoy being in the attack, being creative. And I feel like that's probably closest I could get. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You're like taller and lankier, at least from how tall I am. So like, yeah, that would make sense too. And a good shout with a Manchester United player. You at least know that you selected a player from the right team.
Andrew, how about you, man? I was intrigued. Is there any player that you'd kind of like liking yourself to?
I always would say like Landon Donovan is like the style of play that I would play. So when I was a kid, I always watched Landon. I thought he was so awesome. And then he was like one of the first players that I knew that went to Europe. So I always thought that was super cool when I was a kid. So I even like kind of modeled my game after him a little bit. And thankfully, God just graced me with like endurance. So like I can just like kind of run the whole time for the whole game. And like I said earlier, like that's really the main skill that I had. And Landon, he can just run for the entire game. He's also like kind of played in that attacking midfield, sometimes a winger position. So I kind of do the same. So I would play as like that right-sided midfielder. My college coach would shove me as a right back occasionally just because I can run a lot. So that's probably like that type of player is what I would do. Of course, different worlds of levels, but style play, that's what I would try to emulate at least. What would you say about yourself, FaZe? You're also on the taller side, at least compared to me.
Yeah. So, but growing up, I think I was always saw myself a bit of a number 10, like a Bruno Fernandes-esque style player, just kind of trying to link up the play. And as I've kind of got older, I feel a bit more shrinking into more like a centre defensive midfield role. So I think that's just time, right? Like I like the concept of being able to get the ball and look up and just see a play and be able to kind of see the right kind of opportunity and just kind of put one through. Even then when you're playing like pro clubs, playing FIFA, for example, I always try and play like that in the midfield back. So maybe back in the day, maybe like a Pogba situation, like Paul Scholes, that kind of like, I play close to Paul. Me and Paul Scholes are very similar in play. And I would say that we're basically the same player, me and Paul Scholes. So
I see. Same levels and everything too. That's
same level.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's why you're here on
Nutmegged
and not in the Premier League still. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I just got a night off tonight, so of course. But I think taking it away from your playing and moving forward into, obviously Andrew kind of mentioned more kind of that kind of director style role. What is your goal for that? Like, what made you want to kind of go into those spaces? What is like a day to day look like for you? Because I think a lot of our listeners, the fact that someone is in that style role, even if it is obviously for the Delaware Rising as well, how does that look for you? Like, what's a day to day thing? Like, how does that role work?
Yeah, so I mean, pretty much everyone in lower league soccer always has a day job, right? So during the day, I'm a graphic designer and videographer at a marketing agency. So thankfully, I can kind of use some of those skills as well with Delaware Rising to do some great marketing stuff there. But yeah, as far as a director role, I'm kind of looking after the experience, so players' experience, the coaching staff's experience, and the fans' experience, and how we can use what we're doing here to enhance those experiences, create opportunities for players, for coaches as well, and just create opportunities in soccer. A lot of my role is kind of just making sure we're out and about. People see us on social media, that we're like fulfilling orders, that we're anything from our store, our website, tracking our budget, purchasing anything that we might need, whether that's for the coaching staff or really just anything and everything.
And it's a lot because like he really does like run the club and manage all of those different elements. And like the one element you said is unfortunately a lot of people here in the US in lower league soccer. And actually, FaZe, I'd be curious to hear the same from your side of things over in Europe, but like you have to have a full-time job and then you just do this lower league stuff on the side because you love it. And it usually doesn't pay. If it does pay at all, it's not going to be very much.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. It is very much like it's not, but as Nathan was saying, I was like, that sounds like a full-time job, like 100%, like all the things, the tasks you're doing, etc. sounds like incredibly busy. And that's something that, like I said, it almost feels like it probably should be a full-time, but here as well, like even the lower league stuff here in the UK, we'd have something like Sunday League, which is something that we have at these lower level stuff where it's, you play on a Sunday and you're working 5 days, and your Sunday is your 1 day of football where you come in, you'll be traveling on a big minibus with all the boys together, going to different places in the UK and or in your borough, in your area anyway. So it's something that you kind of did together on a Sunday. So the fact that you've kind of done it on the side and also you are essentially building the club from the ground up, which is for especially for listeners in the UK, that sounds just crazy. And the thought of that happening from the UK and you guys doing it in the US is crazy. So yeah, congratulations, guys. I think it's great the fact you're building the team and doing so well and doing from scratch. I think it's great.
It's been a heck of a journey, that's for sure.
I appreciate it.
And then thinking a bit more so about, say, so we've done kind of like how you were kind of playing, thinking a bit more so like taking back to kind of maybe Premier League, for example. Is there, Andrew, obviously we talked about, if you listen to the Nutmegged podcast, MLS, and Andrew, we know how Andrew feels about it. We've also heard a little bit perhaps what you think about the MLS, Nathan. So let's put that in. Let's get a bit of context to how you feel about the MLS. I want to open that up to both of yourselves, because I think that'll be a really interesting one. When I knew you were coming on the show, I was like, we need to start discussing the MLS in this, please. Obviously Columbus Crew won, so I feel like this is a nice little segue into that. So thoughts on the MLS and where you think it's currently heading at the moment?
Yeah, so MLS is the top division in American soccer, highest professional you can get. And it is a closed system, which is the opposite of all the rest of the world, pretty much, except for a few other countries. But I think MLS has a pretty strong grip on American soccer. So I think they're going to continue to add in expansion teams, and maybe if they get to a certain amount of teams where they do have some sort of inter-MLS promotion relegation, but MLS has kind of been encroaching into other aspects of American soccer with MLS Next Pro. They have like a youth program as well. I think it's called MLS Play or something, MLS Go, something like that. So their academies as well. So they're kind of jumping into other branches of the system. But I think, we're going to continue to see it grow and these teams come in because it just has that celebrity status like a lot of other sports do in America, where these teams are just in your face all the time, and there's no chance of them dropping down with promotion relegation, right? So a lot of people are kind of intrigued by that. And I know in terms of like a business investment, it's pretty safe for investors. So they always like that. But that's kind of my aspect of what MLS looks like. And I can see them continuing to try to jump into other aspects of the experience as well, into lower league soccer as well, as they continue to grow into MLS Next Pro and things like that.
I don't ever see the MLS opening up in such a way that allows other leagues or teams from other leagues to participate fully in like a promotion relegation system. So unfortunately, the way that it's structured is similar to how like all other professional leagues in the US for other sports are structured. So if you think of like the NFL as an example, so the NFL is structured the same way the MLS is. So it's just kind of unfortunate that the MLS, which was created like around 1994, that structure, they were like, oh, hey, that's what the NFL structure looks like. They've been doing pretty well. They've been growing, getting a lot of money, a lot of income. So then let's just create the MLS as the same type of structure. So they didn't really take any cadence or any information from what it looked like abroad. Sadly, they just kind of went with the NFL closed off structure where all the clubs that are in the MLS are just franchises of the league. So that money is essentially just shared between all the clubs. So it doesn't really offer the experience of like what you see in promotion relegation, where if a club gets demoted from a top tier league, if you're talking like the Premier League, then they get booted down to the championship. There's like those different league structures. Essentially, MLS wants to control all of that so that they can control all the money in that pyramid. So the only way that I see promotion relegation ever happening is the MLS doing it inter-MLS, like Nathan had talked about, so that they can be the ones that control all the money, all the finances, and the direction of the club. The one cool part was, I know, FaZe, you mentioned, yes, Columbus Crew, they won the MLS Cup, which I've talked about before. I'm not a huge MLS fan. I do like the Columbus Crew. It's our hometown club. That's the club I grew up supporting when I was a kid. But when Don Garber got on the stage to hand the MLS Cup, the trophy, to the Crew, everyone in the crowd was booing him. Like you could hear it super loud on the TV. So that was pretty cool because I'm not a fan of Don Garber myself.
Who is that? Just for our listeners.
Yes, he's the commissioner of the MLS and has been so for quite a while.
The big bad commissioner is the one there. Well, you've kind of a little bit. You've kind of spoke about it a little bit, but I was asked if there's one thing you could change about the MLS. What would it be? But you kind of said a bit about that, right?
I'd probably have to be just allowing it to be an open system, because so many of the flaws in the American soccer structure come from that. And I think we truly lack a lot of depth and opportunities for players. Like I mentioned before, so many people stop playing after high school or after college just because there's no opportunities to play after that at a competitive level. So I think just opening up that opportunity and create some opportunities for more players is what would be an exciting and good difference for U.S. soccer.
And the one thing I would change is, of course, having that open system, but then also with that, providing a better structure for U.S. soccer, the federation overall. So the federation, like U.S. soccer in general, like works in collaboration with the MLS. So they had like this organization in between them called SUM that allowed like them to collaborate on things and be more in control. Like you can get really into the weeds on this kind of stuff. It was super shady. I was not a fan. A lot of like true soccer fans that understood it were not fans. That's dissolved, but the relationship between U.S. soccer and MLS is still there. So there's all this deep stuff, but I would like to see the U.S. Federation actually act like a legitimate federation and try to grow the game as opposed to just deferring to the MLS, because now they've essentially passed on the growth of the game to the MLS and saying, hey, you guys lead the charge with whatever direction you see. And the problem with that is that's a monopoly because the MLS controls all the money. They control the system. They're up at the top. So whatever direction U.S. soccer goes is essentially directed by the MLS. So my change would be having the federation be more in charge of the actual growth themselves. So an example of that is the federation. There used to be a youth program that the federation actually ran. It started with a D. I forget the name. It didn't go very well. Yeah, so it didn't work out, and they ended up closing it down. with counsel from the MLS so that the MLS could then create MLS Go, which is what Nathan had talked about, which is the youth structure and kind of academy type of deal for younger players in the US. So I think that should be run by the federation. I think the federation should be, again, the one to direct the direction for U.S. soccer because, again, if it's going to be a monopoly, that screws up the rest of the system for all of the lower league teams, like Delaware Rising as an example, because we really have no say and no dog in the fight to help grow soccer because it's all run by the MLS. So if I could change it, I would make sure the federation actually acts like a federation.
Nice. Putting the MLS to rights there. I love that. I think it's really intriguing conversation. Like I said, we've spoken a lot about this as well. And anytime there is any kind of areas or like improvements, updates, for example, the MLS, we're always one of the first just to kind of speak about that and discuss that. And it's always good to have obviously Andrew on board for that because we get the good stuff there. I think about thinking about more kind of like footballers in general, like past or present, what I want to kind of put to you, Nathan, is if you could do like a training session with one player, past or present, who would it be and why?
I'd probably have to go with Ronaldinho. I don't think it would be a very intense training session, but definitely would be a lot of fun just because he brings so much joy and love into the sport, which you don't see too often from a lot of players. So I think that would just be a blast to spend time with him.
And Andrew, what are you thinking? You thinking Ronaldinho, yeah?
Ronaldinho was super be fun. And like the way that he like made the game so exciting for people with his skill was just awesome. But I would say David Beckham, actually. So he was one of my favorite players growing up as well. Also being like one of those more attacking midfield type of players, trying to like model my play style after like those types of midfielders. So I would say him for two reasons. One, he's just such an intense player, the way that he like tried to carry his career, play for Manchester United. That would be cool to be able to experience a Man U player like at the peak of when they were just such an awesome squad and like learning about the experience of what it was like then. But I would want him like as a present individual, like not talking past David Beckham. I'd like to see him now so that I could learn about all those experiences. I'm sure he like still has the awesome skill. So training session would be really cool. And then the other benefit that I would like to learn about is how his role in creating Inter Miami, his experience as being an owner there and helping bring in Messi to the MLS, which has been a crazy story, what that looks like from like a director level, like trying to help grow the club, structure that, what that's look like. So just those two different elements of being an awesome player, but then also an owner of an MLS, a strong type of club, unfortunately isn't the MLS, but I think that would be awesome to like learn from those two aspects of him. FaZe, what about you? What player are you selecting to join you on the pitch?
I had two players. Number one that came to mind was Steven Gerrard. I mean, as a Man United fan, that doesn't sound like something like, but I was obviously a big fan of Steven Gerrard growing up. I think as a footballer, are you watching Premier League growing up? It was peak seeing Gerrard on the pitch and stuff. So Gerrard was that area, was the one person that came to mind. Also potentially Zinedine Zidane. And I think the way in which he manipulates a ball, it would be good just to physically see that in person would be insane. And obviously learn some more about like how he does that and actually get an understanding of that. But I think he's got a really good footballing brain as well. Because if you look at some of the games he's played, the passing material he's done, especially for the France team, for example. So yeah, I think that'd be pretty cool to look into.
Yeah. And both those players now pretty solid managers too.
Yeah. And thinking of football, keeping on to football and different players, etc. If you can make one change to a one rule change to a football match, what would it be and why? So any rule change you can make. This is like free for all.
While you think about it, I'll toss you my idea. So FaZe and I talked about this a little bit on some previous episodes. If I could do like one specific thing, I've almost tweaked it a little bit now. So it's always been getting rid of throw-ins. So people are just always moving up and down the pitch. Referees don't really care. So I would transition to kick-ins. That would make throw-ins more interesting because then now, even if you're maybe around halfway mark of the pitch, you could still treat that as a corner, essentially. So that would make life more interesting. So that was always my go-to answer. However, now there's this new idea that I've heard about on the Total Soccer Show, another podcast that I love to listen to. They have this idea, I think it was from a listener maybe, or they had a question about it, and they were talking about a sin bin. So that's essentially what you have in the NHL. So if something goes wrong, I don't even know hockey too deeply about how their rules work, but if something goes wrong where like a player causes a foul or it's a certain type of foul, they have to go off of the ice for 2 or 4 minutes or something like that. And they have to play a man down, essentially. They have that in indoor in some types of structures as well. So I think that could be interesting. So if there's like a certain foul, or maybe you get a yellow card, you have to go off of the pitch for 2 minutes and play a man down. I think that could make life interesting too. So that could be 2 rule changes that I would be potentially interested in.
Yeah, I think the sin bin idea is a bit interesting. I think there would have to be a lot more like discussed on what that looks like, in terms of like, what does red cards look like, and is that going to like increase violence or things like that? Because I saw some pretty interesting ideas on that as well. But I think I would also have to agree with your idea on the kick-ins. That would actually be a pretty nice change to the game and change of pace in terms of how possession is kept throughout the field, and how it could be a bit more attacking. I know a lot of people always mention getting rid of offsides, the offside rule. I think that that might be a bit too drastic. So I think the kick-ins is a good shout.
I'm also actually curious about that. That's a good point. A lot of people, but I almost have the perception that a lot of people say getting rid of offsides is an American thing, just maybe because Americans typically, from my view, don't understand it. At least being like a high school coach, there are so many people in the crowd that you'll hear don't understand the offside rule still. And so that's like, I think, a common thing that you have to explain regularly. Is that maybe a conversation that also happens in the UK, that people suggest, hey, let's get rid of offsides?
I think that would probably, and the reason I say that as well, because you think about VAR that's coming into play, you can see the smallest things now, like an elbow or like a kneecap, and you're just like, surely this is actually making it more complex than it actually needs to be. Like, if they, like, obviously there's stuff at the moment where I think with the ball having some sort of like computerized material inside, which allows you to automatically say it's an offside, will make things so much easier. But if you imagine you're like a linesman running down the line, you're literally following that last defender. Like, it's just, with your eye, it's just really hard to do. I think that'd be one thing I agree would probably want to change. And as I was thinking, that's something more fun I was thinking as well, would be quite interesting, would be if there's a penalty, right? So there's a foul in the box, there's a penalty. No player on the pitch can take it, and it has to be a fan that has to take the free. And like, it has to be a new fan. Like, you can't have like football trained fan. You have to just kind of go, like, has to take the. I think that would be.
I'm here for that.
Insane. Can you imagine?
I also heard this other idea of wherever you get fouled, even if it's in the 18, that's where you take the kick from. So remove the penalty spot, and like, you're just taking the penalty wherever that penalty happens. So if there's like a handball on the line, you're taking that free kick from like inches away. So then what, the player's just like going to line up, you just smack it at them. That's going to cause some chaos. I'm here for that.
It'd be so cool. I imagine that as well. Like, even with the fan, like, people would turn up in full kit, ready, like, just in case. It could be my time. Today could be the day I take a free, like a corner or like a penalty, for example. I think that'd be really.
Imagine the attendance increases because of that rule. Like, I would go to every MLS game just for the hope of that happening.
For sure. Like, at that point, you're in, because you're not just a fan. You could win, and say it's like a 98th minute, and you have some bold, like 70, like 50-year-old guy just like turning up, being like, your turn, and it's like 92nd minute. And they have to like take a penalty. I think it would just be, that's drama. I tell you right, that's drama.
So much drama. And I think like we probably should make sure that the Chicago Fire leadership don't hear this, because if they do, they might implement this, try to get some fans actually to show up to their games. So that could happen.
And then I think the final kind of question for myself as well, just thinking, we've talked a bit about 5 years, but thinking a bit more, if you had any advice for any young listeners that might be listening into the Nutmegged Podcast, which I'm sure there are, because we've got young fans. It's less, we're a growing podcast. Is there any particular sort of tips and advice you'd have people to trying to get into football? So that'd become the first question. So like, how would you get into that side of it? And the second side of it would be more from the sort of back the behind the scenes stuff. So trying to be in more kind of director roles. Like, what advice do you have to someone looking to get into that area?
Yeah, so starting off with the people trying to get into the sport, kind of based on your age, just trying to find any opportunity to play in your area you can. If there's some sort of like youth rec pickup or tryouts you could go to just try and see what it's like. Even as an adult, you could probably find some pickup games in your area. Usually larger cities have tons of pickup opportunities just to kick about. And then anyone trying to get into some sort of like leadership into soccer, I think you do kind of have to have that experience in the sport to kind of get an understanding of what you're getting into. But if there's a role you want, you got to start somewhere. Maybe that's an internship with some clubs in your area, trying to get a taste of what it's like to be involved in behind the scenes. So that's always not something that a lot of people kind of understand or get to experience. So just trying to get as much experience as possible and just try and find the joy in it, right? Because that's kind of why a lot of us do what we do. You don't make tons of money in lower league sports, so just find the joy in it.
And beautifully put. I will also piggyback off that. And like you had said, you can get an internship somewhere. That is so true, of course, in like larger organizations in the soccer world, but then also reach out to like your local club, like do a little research, figure out the closest club to you and just say, hey, how can I get involved with you guys? Whether that's helping with some fan engagement stuff, helping run some social media things, just from like this lower league club perspective, the more volunteers, the better the experience overall. And from the volunteers that we've had with Delaware Rising, I think they've had an awesome experience too. So just a great example, like Dan the Man, he is now our broadcaster. So he is the one that will like film games and then talk and do the commentary over each match. And I think like he's really enjoyed that experience too. So like there's so many opportunities, whatever your interest is, just try to reach out to your local club and see if there's a spot for you there. And then also from the fan perspective, I know you asked that at the very beginning. So like if you're going to say, yo, I'm just starting to get into this thing called soccer or football if you're abroad somewhere else, then just pick a team and start following it. And then just see what it's like to be a fan of a club and just to like learn what it is to be a fan, because it's a really cool spot to be. Delaware Rising is always looking for fans. So it's a good shout.
There we go.
Speaking of fans, I know that was like kind of our last question, but Nathan, I want to throw you one more just to kind of get some insight on your football experience. I say football because I'm talking Premier League right now. What is the club that you support? Because I know we have a fantasy league going on with Delaware Rising. I know you said to not talk about it because it hasn't been the best year for you. I won't bring it up. But we're talking just specifically your favorite team in the Premier League and then any other clubs that you support around.
Yeah. So, again, fantasy's not going too hot, but we don't have to talk about that. So the team I support isn't really the most popular team, so it comes to a shock to most people I talk about it with. But Crystal Palace is it's kind of the team I
wow, I did not expect that. Did not expect that.
It's not too common. Yeah, so I kind of started watching them when they're in the Championship, and to kind of made that run in playoffs to get into the Premier League. And just watching players like Yannick Bolasie and Wilfried Zaha, and just how like skilled they are with the ball and how much just passion they have for the game with all their tricks and flicks. It's just a joy to watch. So I think that's kind of what got me more into watching the professional game. And then besides the Premier League, I don't really support a lot of other clubs. But I'd say Delaware Rising's the top club I support, just because, I'm the director there and got to show some love. But I think just trying to get as local as I can with the teams I support is kind of important to me. I mean, even like the Columbus Crew is 30 minutes away from where I am. So it's not necessarily the most local club for me.
Yeah, I agree. Especially moving downtown as well. It's a little bit of a further journey now from us out here on the outskirts around Delaware. I'll throw you one like final closing question, unless FaZe wants to throw you anything else.
No, you go for it.
So there's a tradition that we do at the end of each podcast called the Nutmeg of the Week. So normally we go ahead and plan this, but I want to throw you and ask you what your nutmegged of your soccer career is. So just kind of a general question, like what is the goofiest, weirdest thing that you've experienced in your playing career? I know that may be a lot to think about, so I'll throw an example of a nutmegged of the week at you really quickly because it just came across my notifications, and something that unfortunately does happen from time to time. It should not, because being a ref is already hard enough. But the Turkish club president, Faruk Koka, just punched a referee in the face as fans invaded the pitch after the final whistle. So not even just a player, the president of the Turkish club. So there's that for you. So that is my nutmegged of the week here. So that's just kind of an example of what a nutmegged of the week could be. It doesn't have to be that insane or that crazy. We've talked about how another example was Messi coming to join the MLS, the crazy deal that he got, and then their team not even making the playoffs. So that's also kind of a funny, goofy thing that happened. So just an example to get your mind flowing.
Yeah, I got a good nutmeg for you. All right. So youth soccer, this was probably U16, U17. we were playing in a tournament. So that's like a weekend, you play 3-4 games. There's like a little showcase in a group with a group of teams. And we actually had an older player that was outside of the age range that you can have on your team. So our coach called him down, which great idea. Of course, you're not going to be allowed to have that player. Somehow he's on the field, he's playing in the team, scores probably 2 goals. This just sick outside of the boot, top 90, like he's balling out. He's having a great time. So we finished the game, we win 3-1. That's probably the first or second game in the tournament. And we're like, all right, yeah, we're doing well. Usually we kind of struggled in a lot of tournaments we played. So we're all in high hopes. He goes to leave. We're like, all right, see you, man. We'll see you at the next game in like 3 hours or whenever it is. We go up to the next game and it's like, oh, we all have to go home. We're not allowed to play anymore in this tournament. And the reason is because they caught him running around in his underwear. What? and then they realized he was, of course, too old to be playing in the tournament. But the reason he was running in his underwear is because he's playing a game called Senior Tag. And in the United States, it's a game where you have like so this is like the senior class, the top class in your graduating your school. So they have teams, and there's like a pot at the end. So there's money involved for the winning team, and you have water guns. And if you are in your underwear, some schools do it where you're naked, but if you're in your underwear, you're safe and you can't get targeted or get out by getting shot with a water gun. But if you do get shot and you are clothed, then you are eliminated. And then the last team standing continues on. So he was trying to evade some water guns there and got spotted by some police. So
that is wild.
That's insane. Wow. Very American. Yeah. How very American that is.
Love it.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
What a way to end the show.
Exactly right. Wow. Love the good reputation that we have over here in the US. It's just great. Well, fam, we are out. Nathan, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, as well as all of you listeners. Thanks for joining us. We will see you in 2 weeks. Before then, jump on our Instagram account at Nutmegged Podcast. DM us with your listener questions or your take it or leave it submissions. Hopefully, you're able to get on a pitch somewhere. If you do, just don't get nutmegged. Peace.